The Siege of Vienna, how 20,000 Poles saved Europe from Ottoman conquest. Picture this. It's September 11th, 1683. The city of Vienna is literally crumbling. For 2 months, 140,000 Ottoman soldiers have been detonating explosives beneath the city walls, collapsing entire sections into rubble. Inside, 15,000 desperate defenders are down to their last reserves of gunpowder. Women and children huddle in cellars while cannonballs rain from the sky. The Ottoman Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa, has already commissioned a golden saddle for his triumphal entry into the city. Europe's fate hangs by a thread so thin you could cut it with a scimitar. And then, on a hilltop overlooking this apocalyptic scene, 20,000 Polish cavalry appear like something out of mythology. What happened next would be remembered as the largest cavalry charge in human history, and the day one man's obsession with glory accidentally saved Western civilization. The impossible situation. Let's rewind to understand just how dire things were. The Ottoman Empire wasn't some distant threat. It was the superpower of its age, controlling territory from Algeria to the Persian Gulf, from Budapest to the gates of Vienna itself. Sultan Mehmed IV had given his Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa, one mission: conquer Vienna, and the rest of Europe would fall like dominoes. The Ottomans brought everything. Their army was a multicultural juggernaut. Elite janissaries who'd trained since childhood, Crimean Tatar cavalry who could shoot arrows at full gallop, Serbian sappers who'd literally invented siege mining, and artillery that could reduce stone walls to dust. They brought 300 cannons. They brought pontoon bridges to cross the Danube. They even brought a mobile city of tents so luxurious that Kara Mustafa's personal pavilion had silk walls and Persian carpets. Vienna's defenders, meanwhile, were outgunned, outnumbered, and running on fumes. Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg commanded a garrison that shrank daily from disease, exhaustion, and constant bombardment. By early September, the Ottomans had blown a massive breach in the walls. One more assault, maybe two, and Vienna would fall. And not just any help. It required something that seemed impossible in 17th century Europe, where Catholic kingdoms spent more time fighting each other than uniting against common enemies. Enter the king who lived for this moment. King John III. Sobieski of Poland was 50 years old in 1683, and he'd spent his entire adult life preparing for exactly this scenario. He'd fought the Ottomans more times than he could count. He'd studied their tactics, learned their language, and developed a near-obsessive understanding of how they waged war. But here's what makes Sobieski fascinating. He wasn't some grim, calculating strategist. He was a romantic warrior poet who wrote passionate love letters to his French wife while planning battles. He genuinely believed he was living inside an epic tale, and he desperately wanted to be its hero. When the call came that Vienna was surrounded, Sobieski didn't hesitate. He assembled the largest cavalry force Poland could muster, 20,000 horsemen, including 3,000 hussars, the winged cavalry that would become legendary. These weren't just soldiers, they were minor nobles who'd trained their entire lives for mounted combat, wearing armor that cost a year's income, and wings made of eagle or ostrich feathers that created a thunderous noise when they charged. The Polish king then did something extraordinary. He convinced his rivals to follow him. The Holy Roman Emperor, Leopold I, had fled Vienna in panic. The German princes were bickering. The Pope was frantically trying to organize a relief force. Sobieski somehow welded this dysfunctional alliance together, taking supreme command of a combined Christian force of roughly 65,000 men. The race against time. What followed was a desperate march against the clock. Every day mattered. Every mile mattered. Sobieski pushed his men through forests and mountains, covering ground at a pace that shouldn't have been possible with 17th century logistics. Inside Vienna, Count Starhemberg and his garrison fought with the courage of the damned. They knew no help was coming in time, or at least that's what they had to assume. When the Ottomans breached the walls, Viennese defenders fought them in the rubble with swords, muskets, and improvised weapons. Citizens joined the defense. Even priests picked up weapons. The Ottomans could taste victory. Kara Mustafa sent messengers to Istanbul announcing that Vienna would fall within days. He'd already begun planning how to divide the city's wealth among his officers. Then, on September 11th, scouts brought Kara Mustafa devastating news. A massive relief army had arrived on the Kallenberg Heights overlooking the city. The charge that shook the world. Here's where history becomes legend. Sobieski surveyed the battlefield from the heights and saw the entire Ottoman siege laid out below him like a game board. The Ottoman army was arrayed with their backs to the Vienna woods, focused on the city's walls. They'd been besieging Vienna for so long that they'd grown complacent, never imagining an army could arrive so quickly. The Polish king made a decision that lesser commanders would have called insane. He would attack immediately before the Ottomans could fully reposition. And he wouldn't just attack. He would lead a cavalry charge down a forested hillside so steep that horses would struggle to maintain footing. The Christian forces attacked in waves throughout the day. German and Austrian infantry pushed forward, engaging Ottoman positions. The fighting was brutal and chaotic. By late afternoon, both sides were exhausted. And then, at approximately 5 p.m., Sobieski gave the order. 20,000 cavalry, Polish, Austrian, and German, formed up on the hillside. At the center rode the Polish hussars with their eagle wings creating a forest of feathers. Contemporary accounts describe a sound like thunder mixed with the shrieking of birds of prey as they began to move. The charge started slow on the steep slope, building momentum as they descended. The ground literally shook. Ottoman soldiers looked up from the fight and saw what must have seemed like an avalanche of steel and horseflesh crashing toward them. The impact was devastating. The cavalry smashed through Ottoman lines like a battering ram through paper. Janissaries, elite troops who never retreated, broke and ran. Artillery positions were overrun before gunners could reload. In minutes, the entire Ottoman army disintegrated into a fleeing mob. Kara Mustafa barely escaped with his life, abandoning his fabulous tent, his treasure, and his carefully planned invasion. The man who'd been imagining his triumphant entry into Vienna was now fleeing for his life. The aftermath, a turning point in history. The victory was total and absolute. The Ottomans left behind 300 cannons, thousands of tents, mountains of supplies, and, most famously, sacks of strange brown beans that Viennese citizens discovered made an energizing drink when roasted and brewed. Thus, according to legend, Vienna's famous coffee culture was born from the spoils of the battle. But the real impact was geopolitical. The Siege of Vienna marked the high water mark of Ottoman expansion into Europe. Never again would they threaten Central Europe. The battle's outcome emboldened Christian kingdoms to push back, beginning a long Ottoman retreat that would continue for centuries. Sobieski became the hero he'd always dreamed of being. He wrote to his wife, "We came, we saw, God conquered." The Pope celebrated him as the savior of Christendom. He'd achieved immortality. Here's the final twist that makes this story resonate today. This wasn't a clash of civilizations or religions in the way we might imagine. The Christian army included Orthodox Serbians. The Ottoman army included Hungarian Christians. Sobieski himself admired Islamic culture and spoke Turkish. This was about power, territory, and which empire would dominate Europe, wrapped in religious rhetoric on both sides. 20,000 Polish cavalry charging down a hillside on September 11, 1683, didn't just save Vienna. They accidentally locked in the trajectory of European history for the next 3 centuries, determining which cultures, languages, and political systems would dominate the continent. And it all came down to one 60-year-old romantic who desperately wanted to be the hero of his own legend, and somehow, against impossible odds, actually pulled it off.